Hello and welcome to Pocket Potential. Our aim here is to help you to maximize your potential by taking small steps in the right direction. Now let's jump into the show. All right, welcome back. I'm your host, Paul Croswell, and I am so glad you tuned in today. We have a very fun episode in store. We're going to be talking about how to silence your inner critic. And really I'll be sharing a few simple steps that I found very helpful to silencing your inner critic. But before we dive into today's episode, I want to let you know about my mental health guide that I just released. And I did this for a few reasons. I'll leave a link to the download page in the description of this episode for you. But I made this mainly because a lot of people that I come across are really kind of held back by what I call minor mental health issues. These are things that are not severe as far as severity and mental health goes. However, they're big enough to impede or to impact negatively your day-to-day life, like your ability to focus, your productivity level, just your overall ability to function at your highest or best capacity. And no one wants that, especially when it's so easy to overcome. And so I've compiled a list of the 5 best ways to boost your mental health quickly and in an easy and safe way. Literally, you can probably do it well within a week. So if you or someone you know could use something like this, just follow the link to the download page. It is completely free. So go ahead and share that, spread that around. That would benefit you as well as benefit me by being able to help a bunch of people out. And also, if you like and support this podcast, there are 2 ways that you can support. One, you can leave a positive review on whatever platform you listen on, whether that's Apple iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen. Or you can share this episode with a friend or share a episode with a friend that you happen to really like. And that would be an amazing, amazing compliment to me in you sharing that. And so thank you again for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's jump into today's episode where we talk about just a few simple steps to silencing your inner critic. Because when it comes to the inner critic, there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think. I've read a lot of things that truly don't line up with the truth about what the inner critic is. Our inner critics are often allies who have a difficult time with saying what they mean, right? That's what our inner critic is, or if you happen to have multiple happening somehow, well, that's what they are. And generally, the inner critic intends to be helpful, but it rarely reaches that goal. And so sometimes we just need to turn down or completely turn off, in some respect, the inner critic so that we can function and get stuff done. And for me, the reason this has become such an interesting journey and a part of my journey in my life is because as far as I can remember, I've always been an artist. Right, I always spent more time painting and drawing and writing and sculpting than I ever did on any athletic activity. And if you know my story, you'll know why exactly that is. But as a result of this, I became intimately acquainted with my inner critic very, very early in life. And I'd love to tell you that I mastered the art of completely doing away with the inner critic, but that's just not true. Quite frankly, I don't think it's possible to completely do away with the inner critic. Instead, I've learned the art of pushing through or turning down the inner critic to be able to create consistently despite its presence or existence. And the truth is, you can transform your inner critic from a Rambo personality, which really kind of feels unstoppable, to more of a puppy, that you can train to be present and be active when you want and to step aside when you need to. And just as a note, there's a lot of great content already out there on the subject of the inner critic. If you want to do a deep dive into the psychology of it, I say go for it. I found it to be a lot of fun. However, if you're interested in taking action today, here are 4 steps that I found very helpful to silencing your inner critic. Step number 1 to silencing your inner critic is to plan ahead. Now, this comes easy to some and not so easy to others, but this is the easiest and smallest step to take when it comes to silencing your inner critic. Because when you plan ahead, you give your mind and your inner critic a sense of what to expect and how to prepare itself to approach the task. And so by the time you get to actually doing the work, your inner critic is far more relaxed and not as anxious and throwing out all the reasons why you couldn't or shouldn't do it, because you gave yourself time to adjust mentally and emotionally for the task, right? And so any subtle emotions you might have has had the time to settle, so that it's not feeding that inner critic. So that's the first step. The second step to silencing the inner critic is to create the space, right? And this is one that I don't hear a lot of people talk about this, but when you create the space that you work in, it heightens your ability to focus. It heightens your sharpness, your mental sharpness, as well as your productivity. And while we can really force ourselves to produce almost anywhere on the planet, especially if you have Wi-Fi these days, um, if you prepare ahead and create the space, you've just boosted your mental sharpness to a level where your inner critic, you have more control over how robust it is and how active it is. And so while you can go to a coffee shop and put on a pair of headphones, and maybe crank out some work, depending on whether or not you really like the environment or it's just all you have available to you, you may need to consider what it looks like to create the ideal work environment in order to boost your mental sharpness and have more control over the activity of your inner critic. Right? So that's step number 2, is to create the space. Step number 3 is to speak safety. Learn to speak safety to yourself, especially as your inner critic is speaking to you. Because there are times, if you listen carefully, that your inner critic is really just trying to protect you. Because that's its job, right? It tries to protect you from things like failure or embarrassment by convincing you not to even try if it senses you're going to put yourself in a position where those things can happen. And you combat this by reassuring yourself verbally and out loud, if you can, that you're not in any danger, that the reward of actually taking the step and doing the work is greater than the safety of failure, if you want to look at it that way. And then finally, this is the fourth and final step, probably the most significant step that you can take to silencing your inner critic, is to take action. Actually do something. Take steps towards the thing that you're supposed to be doing in the first place. When you do this, you prove to your inner critic that the risk is not so bad after all, and that you're actually okay when you get to the other end of it. And so the inner critic essentially is reassured in a more active sense, realizing, oh, well, you did it and you are fine, or you're not embarrassed, or failure isn't the end of the world. And all of a sudden, the next time you go to do something that's, a little intimidating, the inner critic can pull on that experience and realize, oh, well, we did that and it wasn't so bad. Why not? And so you get less internal resistance whenever you learn to take steps. And it doesn't need to be a big action step that you take. It can be a small step in the right direction, as I love to say. So those are the 4 steps, simple steps to silencing your inner critic. Like I said, you can do a deep dive into this, the psychology of it, and probably find, dozens. But these are the simplest and easiest ones to take. Just to recap, step 1 is to learn to plan ahead, giving yourself a heads up on what to expect. Step 2 is to create the space. Find the ideal work environment that helps to boost your mental sharpness and productivity. Step 3 is to speak safety. Speak safety, especially when your inner critic is yelling. It's just really trying to protect you. And so reassure that you are safe. And then step 4 is to take action. Actually do something and teach your inner critic over time that, hey, it's actually okay if I take this step. It's not the end of the world. Today's question as we wrap up our episode is, when is your inner critic most loud? Like, when is your inner critic the loudest? Because the inner critic really speaks at all times to us. At times it's in line and it tells us what we want to hear. It's reassuring. But at other times, it's really, really loud, and that's different for each person. For some, it's loudest while you're actually doing the work. For others, it's loud right before, and for others, it's loud while you're reviewing it. For some, if you really struggle, it's loud throughout the entire process. But when is your inner critic the loudest, and what do you do to navigate that experience? Leave a comment or send me a message. There's a link in the episode description for you to be able to send me a message. You can record it right on your phone and send it in. I'd love to hear from you guys. And that's it. Thanks so much for listening today to The Pocket Potential. My goal, as always, is to help you to take a small step in the right direction. And remember, if you like and support this podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave us a positive review on whatever platform you happen to listen on or watch on. It's very, very helpful to me and our team when you do that. You can also read the blog post version of this episode on my website, paulwcroswell.com. That's Paul W. Croswell, Croswell, paulwcroswell.com/blog, and you'll be able to find the written version of this episode there as well. Thanks so much for listening, guys. We love you, and your support is amazing. Always, always, always remember that a small step in the right direction is a big deal. Until next time.